That car has been disconnected for 3 days, Daniel Hayes whispered, so tell me why it is still calling someone. The digital clock above the office door read 2:17 in the morning. Rain pressed against the garage windows in thin silver lines, and the old fluorescent lights hummed over 3 empty service bays. Daniel stood alone beside the black luxury sedan Victoria Langford had left behind, one hand resting on the edge of the open trunk, the other holding a flashlight aimed beneath the carpeted liner. The battery cable had been disconnected before midnight. The main electrical system was dead. Yet every 23 seconds, a small amber light blinked behind the rear panel, steady as a heartbeat. Daniel watched it repeat twice before reaching for his diagnostic meter. The signal did not belong to the manufacturer. It was coming from a module hidden behind the factory wiring, powered by a separate lithium cell and connected to an antenna no repair manual mentioned. He did not remove it. He photographed the placement, marked the wire paths, and wrote down the exact time on the service sheet. That was how he worked. Slowly. Completely. The kind of careful that kept small mistakes from becoming expensive ones. On the other side of the glass office wall, Noah slept beneath Daniel's work jacket on the narrow couch, one sneaker still on, his math workbook open across his chest. Daniel had promised they would leave by 10. Then the signal started. He had spent the next 4 hours proving the car should have been silent. At 2:18, the module blinked again. This time the garage door sensor lit at the same moment. Headlights appeared at the far end of the alley, white and low through the rain. Daniel switched off his flashlight. The unknown car rolled forward without entering the lot and stopped across from Bay 2. Its engine remained running. No door opened. Daniel moved toward the office, placing himself between the sedan and the room where Noah slept. He did not reach for anything dramatic. He simply locked the interior door, lowered the blinds halfway, and called Ben Carter, whose parts store apartment overlooked the alley from the next block. Ben answered on the 4th ring, voice heavy with sleep. Daniel told him to look outside and read the license plate if he could. There was a pause. Then Ben said the rear plate had been covered. The headlights outside went dark. The hidden module blinked again. Daniel looked from the rear panel to the shadowed car beyond the glass and understood that whoever had installed the device was not waiting for the sedan to be repaired. They were waiting for it to speak. 3 days earlier, Victoria Langford had walked into his garage during a thunderstorm, placed the keys on his counter without meeting his eyes, and said the electrical problem was probably simple. She had left before Daniel could ask a second question. Now her abandoned car was sending a signal to someone parked in the rain, and Daniel had just become the only person standing between them and whatever was hidden inside. 3 days earlier, rain had swept across the city hard enough to blur traffic lights and turn the alley behind Daniel's garage into a narrow stream. He was closing Bay 1 when the black sedan rolled in under its own power, headlights flickering, dashboard warnings flashing in patterns that did not match any ordinary battery failure. A second vehicle stopped behind it. Victoria Langford stepped out first, holding a phone to her ear and speaking in the controlled, clipped tone of someone trying not to let panic become visible. Daniel knew the name only because it appeared on the registration screen when he scanned the vehicle identification number. He did not follow business news. He knew engines, wiring diagrams, school pickup times, and which grocery store marked down milk after 7. Victoria ended the call long enough to place the keys on the counter. Electrical failure, she said. It stalled twice. Send the invoice to Langford Mobility. Daniel glanced through the office glass. Noah sat at the small desk finishing a science worksheet, pencil tucked behind one ear. I need a contact number and authorization before I open the system, Daniel said. Victoria looked toward the rain, not at him. My office will handle it. Grant Mercer entered behind her carrying an umbrella he had not used to cover anyone but himself. His suit remained dry. His expression did not. We are already late, he said. The board call started 10 minutes ago. Victoria checked her phone again. 3 missed calls appeared before the screen went dark. Daniel slid the repair form across the counter. I still need a signature. Grant reached for the pen before she did. Daniel placed one finger on the page. The registered owner signs. Grant looked at him as if the correction had cost more time than it was worth. Victoria signed without reading the estimate line. Her hand moved quickly, but Daniel noticed the slight hesitation when she reached the authorization box. Do not access any personal storage areas, Grant said. Daniel looked at the sedan through the open bay. I am diagnosing an electrical fault. Then diagnose only what you are paid to diagnose. Noah looked up from his worksheet. Grant noticed him and lowered his voice. Victoria did not. She was listening to another call now, one hand pressed against her ear. Daniel heard fragments as she walked toward the door. Emergency board session. Missing approvals. Chicago accounts. She stopped once beside the sedan and looked back at it with an expression that was not attachment. It was uncertainty. Then Grant touched her elbow and guided her toward the waiting vehicle. As he passed the repair bay, he paused long enough to photograph the service number taped to the windshield. Daniel saw the movement reflected in a tool cabinet but said nothing. The second car pulled away with Victoria inside. The sedan remained under fluorescent light, rainwater gathering beneath its tires. Daniel began with the basics. The battery tested strong. The alternator output was normal. The primary control modules showed no permanent failure. Yet the shutdown command had come from somewhere inside the vehicle and then erased itself from the main log. Near the end of the first hour, Noah brought him a paper cup of vending machine cocoa and asked why rich people left cars without waiting for answers. Daniel looked toward the empty alley. Maybe they think answers will follow them, he said. Then he found a second power draw beneath the rear floor, small enough to hide from the factory diagnostics and active enough to prove the car had not been abandoned by accident. Daniel traced the second power draw through the rear harness and found a wire that did not belong there. It had been wrapped in factory-colored tape, routed beside the original loom, and secured with clips placed carefully enough to survive a casual inspection. Whoever installed it understood automotive systems. They also understood how technicians worked. A careless mechanic would have blamed the battery, replaced a control module, and sent the sedan back on the road. Daniel did not replace parts until he understood why they had failed. He disconnected the main battery, waited for every factory circuit to shut down, then watched the hidden line continue drawing current from a separate source beneath the trunk floor. Noah sat behind the glass office wall building a model bridge from craft sticks for school. Every few minutes, he looked up to see whether his father was still working. Daniel removed the rear trim one fastener at a time, photographed each step, and placed the hardware in labeled trays. Behind the carpeted panel, he found a compact black module connected to a camera no larger than a shirt button and a microphone mounted near the rear seat ventilation duct. The device was not tracking where the sedan traveled. It was recording who entered it, which access cards they carried, and what they said after the doors closed. Daniel studied the wiring and noticed a second cable disappearing beneath the trunk latch assembly. The factory diagram showed no circuit there. He pulled the emergency release and nothing happened. The trunk compartment was already open, but a narrow section beneath the spare tire well remained locked behind a steel panel disguised as structural reinforcement. Daniel checked the service authorization again. Grant had specifically warned him not to enter personal storage areas. The hidden panel was not personal storage. It was part of the electrical fault. The module sent a signal every time the concealed lock attempted to verify an access credential, then forced the vehicle network into shutdown when authorization failed. Someone had designed the malfunction to stop the car at a repair location while preserving the hidden compartment. Daniel used the mechanical override listed in the body repair manual, but the panel did not release. A second lock had been added beneath the factory mechanism. He did not force it. He inserted a fiber inspection camera through a drainage opening and viewed the compartment on a small monitor. Inside lay a silver encrypted drive, several shipping invoices bound with a black clip, and an employee access card. Daniel adjusted the camera until the name became visible. The photograph showed a middle-aged man in a Langford Mobility badge. The expiration date was current. The personnel status printed beneath the image was not. Deceased. Noah entered the bay carrying his finished bridge and stopped beside the workbench. Why would someone dead need a key card, he asked. Daniel turned the monitor away from him. They would not. He called the contact number on Victoria's repair authorization. The call transferred twice before Grant answered. Daniel explained that he had found an unauthorized device affecting the vehicle network and needed Victoria to return in person. Grant's voice changed immediately. Do not remove anything else, he said. Close the vehicle and wait. Daniel looked at the hidden module, the sealed compartment, and the access card belonging to a man who had been dead for 2 years. I have not removed anything, he said. Good, Grant replied. Keep it that way. The line went silent. Daniel checked the time. 11:43 in the morning. Outside, a dark sedan slowed near the garage entrance, continued past, then circled the block. Victoria returned just after 9 the next morning with Grant Mercer and 2 members of corporate security. Daniel had not slept. The black sedan remained in Bay 2 with the rear trim removed, every fastener arranged in labeled trays and the concealed compartment still sealed. Noah sat behind the office glass eating cereal from a paper cup, watching the adults enter without taking off their coats. Victoria stopped when she saw the exposed wiring. You opened the vehicle after being told not to, she said. Daniel placed the signed authorization form on the workbench. I traced the circuit causing the shutdown. It leads to a device that was installed outside the factory system. Grant moved toward the trunk. Daniel stepped into the space between him and the open panel, not aggressively, only enough to prevent the evidence from being touched. Nothing gets removed until the owner sees the record. Victoria's expression hardened. I am the owner. Then you should see it. Daniel turned the monitor toward her and displayed the inspection photographs in order, the hidden power cell, the camera, the microphone, the secondary lock, and the employee card visible through the fiber scope. Grant barely looked at the images. This is becoming an attempt to manufacture leverage, he said. Victoria looked at Daniel as though the idea had already occurred to her. What exactly do you want? Daniel glanced toward Noah before answering. Payment for the diagnostic hours. Nothing else. Grant placed a check on the workbench. The amount was 5 times the estimate. Take it, restore the trim, and remove any reference to the auxiliary equipment from your invoice. Daniel did not touch the check. I do not change service records. One of the security employees shifted his weight. Noah stopped eating. Daniel noticed both. He lowered his voice, but not his eyes. The access card belongs to a man listed as deceased. The hidden lock was opened 2 nights ago using that credential. Victoria turned toward Grant. Who is on the card? A former facilities manager, Grant said. There was an internal investigation. Why was his active credential inside my car? Because the mechanic has not established that it was. Daniel opened the electronic lock log. The vehicle recorded the card identification at 11:38 on Tuesday night. Victoria looked at the timestamp. I was in Chicago on Tuesday. Grant answered too quickly. The clock could be wrong. Daniel brought up the navigation service log and the cellular synchronization record. Both confirmed the time to the second. The clock is not wrong, he said. Victoria's attention remained on the screen. The sedan had been parked in the executive garage beneath Langford headquarters while she was 600 miles away. Someone had entered it, used a dead employee's access card, and placed sealed materials in a compartment she did not know existed. Grant reached for the monitor. Daniel turned it away. Do not touch the evidence. The room went quiet. Grant looked at him with the particular stillness of a man unused to being refused by someone in work boots. Victoria looked from Grant to the car. For the first time since entering the garage, her certainty was gone. Her phone rang. She checked the screen and declined the call. Then another call arrived from Evelyn Price. Victoria answered and listened without speaking. 3 finance directors who had questioned unusual shipping invoices had been dismissed during the previous 18 months. Each termination had been approved using Victoria's electronic signature. She had approved none of them. When the call ended, Victoria placed one hand on the sedan's roof as though testing whether it was still something she controlled. Daniel watched her face change. She had arrived believing a mechanic was trying to profit from her problem. Now she understood the car had been carrying someone else's plan under her name. Victoria did not leave with Grant. She told the security employees to wait outside, then stood beside Daniel's workbench while Evelyn remained on the phone. The assistant's voice was quiet, but every detail made the garage feel smaller. 3 dismissed finance directors. 4 shipping vendors with the same mailing address. 11 approvals carrying Victoria's electronic signature on nights when she had been speaking at public events in other states. Daniel listened without interrupting. Grant listened too, though his face gave away nothing now. Those records were reviewed, he said when Evelyn finished. By whom? Victoria asked. Grant adjusted one cuff. By the people responsible for reviewing them. Daniel looked at the hidden module. That is not an answer. Grant turned toward him. This is a corporate matter. Daniel met his eyes. Then stop using my garage to hide it. The silence that followed was brief, but complete. Victoria stepped closer to the monitor. Daniel opened the system logs again and showed her the captured access events. The device had copied card identifiers from passengers entering the rear seat. It had also stored short audio samples whenever certain phrases were spoken inside the vehicle. Authorization confirmed. Release payment. Approve transfer. Daniel played none of them. He only displayed the file structure and timestamps. This module was collecting pieces, he said. Enough to imitate normal access. Victoria understood before Grant could explain it away. Her voice lowered. My voice. Daniel nodded once. Your credentials too. Grant said the technology was speculative. Daniel did not argue. He connected the module to an isolated diagnostic reader and showed the repeated capture pattern. The evidence did not need drama. It only needed to exist. Evelyn sent another file. It contained 6 payments routed through 3 logistics companies, each approved with Victoria's signature and matched to voice authorization records. Daniel compared the timestamps to the module's stored samples. 2 were created within minutes of private conversations recorded inside the sedan. Victoria placed both hands on the workbench and looked down at the screen. She had spent years believing every system around her answered to her. Now she was looking at proof that someone had built a second system inside the first, using her name as the lock and her own voice as the key. Grant stepped toward the door. We should continue this at headquarters. No, Victoria said. He stopped. No one touches the car. No one touches the records. Evelyn, preserve everything and contact Samuel Brooks. Grant's expression tightened at the name. Samuel headed compliance auditing and reported directly to the board. That would create unnecessary exposure, Grant said. Victoria looked at him. Exposure is what happens when something is hidden. Daniel saw the change in her then. Not trust. Not yet. But direction. Grant left without the check. 10 minutes later, the first consequence arrived. Daniel's parts supplier called to suspend his commercial account pending a review. 5 minutes after that, his landlord left a message asking whether the garage had become involved in a legal dispute. By noon, an attorney had emailed a demand that Daniel surrender the vehicle and all copied records. He read it once, then locked his phone. Noah stood beside the office doorway holding his backpack. "Are we in trouble?" he asked. Daniel looked at the rent notice pinned near the desk, then at the sedan occupying the bay that paid most of their bills. "Not yet," he said. That afternoon, after Victoria finally left alone, Daniel checked the security camera from the previous night. At 2:19, while he had been watching the covered car in the alley, a second figure had entered through the side gate and tested the service door. Daniel froze the image. The person wore a Langford Facilities badge. Daniel printed the frame from the security camera and placed it beside the service log. The badge was too blurred to read, but the blue stripe and silver corner matched Langford Facilities' credentials. He called Victoria once. She answered before the second ring. "Do not come here with company security," he said. "Come alone, or bring someone who does not report to Grant." She arrived 40 minutes later in a gray sedan, without a driver, carrying a sealed folder beneath one arm. Samuel Brooks came in a separate car and parked across the alley. He was in his late 50s, careful in the way experienced auditors were careful, looking at doors before documents and at people before claims. Daniel let them inside, locked the service entrance, and moved Noah's homework to the office desk. Noah had fallen asleep on the couch with one hand beneath his cheek, the garage radio playing softly enough not to wake him. Victoria noticed him before she noticed the hidden module. Her eyes stayed on the child for a moment, then moved to the rent notice near the desk and the supplier suspension email printed beside it. "This is because of the car," she said. Daniel did not answer. Samuel opened a clean evidence bag and asked Daniel to explain every step from the first electrical test. Daniel did, beginning with the battery reading and ending with the concealed compartment. He showed the original photographs, the timestamps, the untouched drive, and the camera footage of the person testing the side door. Samuel recorded each item and signed the transfer sheet. Only then did they connect the encrypted drive to an isolated computer that had never touched the garage network. The files opened in layers. Shipping invoices. Access logs. Audio fragments. Payment instructions routed through 3 companies that shared directors, mailing addresses, and legal counsel. Samuel compared them to the documents Victoria had brought. Her folder contained board approvals carrying her signature, along with internal voice confirmations she had never made. Daniel selected one audio file and displayed its waveform beside a recording captured inside the sedan. The pauses, breathing patterns, and background noise were identical. "They did not create your voice from nothing," he said. "They cut it from real conversations." Victoria stood very still. "How long?" Samuel asked. Daniel reviewed the earliest timestamp. "At least 14 months. The room seemed to absorb the number. 14 months of meetings, private calls, and decisions turned into tools someone else could use. Samuel traced the payments through the shell companies. Every route ended near Grant, but not directly enough for one document to prove it. Together, the records did. Victoria looked toward Noah again. "Grant offered you money," she said. "Then he damaged your business." Daniel closed one file and opened another. He thought pressure would make the truth cheaper. And did it? Daniel looked through the glass office wall. For about an hour. He had nearly handed over the drive that morning. He did not tell her that. Noah had asked whether they would lose the garage, and Daniel had spent 60 minutes calculating how much silence might cost compared to homelessness. Then he had watched the side door footage again and understood that surrender would not make them safe. It would only make them easier to erase. Victoria placed her phone on the workbench. "The board meets tomorrow at 9. Grant called the session." Samuel looked up. "For what purpose?" "To remove me." Daniel studied the transaction schedule. A final transfer was timed for 9:15. The company's central records were scheduled for maintenance at 9:20. "He is not removing you after the evidence disappears," Daniel said. He is removing you while it disappears. Victoria looked at him across the black sedan. This time there was no suspicion in her face. Only the recognition that the mechanic she had barely noticed was now the one person explaining how much time she had left. At 8:40 the next morning, the boardroom on the 32nd floor was already full. 12 directors sat beneath a wall of glass overlooking the city, each with a tablet, a coffee cup, and the careful expression of someone who had arrived expecting a controlled disaster. Grant Mercer stood at the far end of the table beside a presentation screen. His jacket was buttoned. His voice was calm. "This company cannot survive another week of leadership uncertainty," he said. Victoria entered before he reached the second slide. Samuel Brooks walked beside her carrying a sealed evidence case. Daniel followed 3 steps behind in a clean gray work shirt, holding the isolated diagnostic reader and nothing else. He had left Noah with Ben Carter across town after promising to be back before school ended. Every face at the table turned toward Daniel. Grant stopped speaking. "This is a restricted meeting," he said. "He is the technician who preserved the evidence you attempted to remove," Victoria replied. No one moved. Grant looked at Daniel and gave a small, humorless smile. "A neighborhood mechanic is not qualified to interpret corporate systems." Daniel placed the reader on the table. "I am not here to interpret your company." He connected the module to a battery pack that had never touched the Langford network. "I am here to show what this machine recorded." Samuel distributed a chain of custody summary to the directors. Evelyn Price joined through a secure video connection from another office, with archived emails and termination records prepared on her screen. Grant objected before the first file opened. Victoria did not answer him. Daniel displayed the original timestamps from the hidden module. The device had captured Victoria's access credentials, voice fragments, and private conversations over 14 months. He showed the board how the same audio segments had been cut, rearranged, and paired with transfer commands. Then Samuel opened the financial records. 6 payments moved through 3 logistics companies. The companies shared legal counsel, addresses, and officers connected to Grant's private holding group. A director near the window leaned forward. Another removed his glasses. Grant said the data had been manipulated. Daniel clicked once. The room heard Victoria's voice approve a transfer. Then he played the original conversation recorded in the sedan. The same words appeared there, separated by 12 minutes and 3 unrelated sentences. The fraud did not sound dramatic when exposed. It sounded mechanical. Precise. Repeated. Evelyn opened an email chain showing Grant requesting the dismissal of finance officers who had questioned the invoices. Samuel displayed the final transfer scheduled for 9:15. The clock on the wall read 9:13. Grant reached for his phone. Victoria said, "Do not." He looked at her. For the first time since Daniel had met him, Grant appeared uncertain. Samuel contacted the banking compliance office and ordered the transfer frozen pending review. At 9:14, the status changed from processing to suspended. No one spoke. The city continued moving beyond the glass. Cars crossed the bridge. Elevators rose and fell. Inside the room, 12 people stared at the evidence a man in work boots had carried from a small garage. Grant tried one last time. "You are trusting a mechanic over your chief financial officer." Victoria looked at Daniel, then at the sealed records. "No," she said. "I am trusting the record over the man who tried to rewrite it." She requested an immediate vote to suspend Grant, preserve all systems, and refer the files for independent investigation. The motion passed without a single opposing hand. Grant closed his presentation without looking at anyone. Daniel disconnected the module and returned it to the evidence case. He did not smile. He did not speak. He had only brought the one thing Grant's money and position could not alter. The machine's memory. By the time Daniel returned to the garage, the afternoon sun had moved across the concrete floor and Noah was sitting on the office steps with Ben Carter, finishing a carton of chocolate milk. Daniel parked beside Bay 1 and stepped out without the evidence case. Samuel had taken custody of everything after the vote. Noah stood immediately. "Did they believe you?" he asked. Daniel looked at the boy, then at the black sedan still waiting beneath the fluorescent lights. "They believed the records." Noah considered that answer and nodded as though it made more sense than victory. The consequences began arriving before sunset. Daniel's parts supplier restored his commercial account and apologized for what it called an administrative misunderstanding. His landlord withdrew the legal warning and offered to extend the lease. The corporate attorney who had demanded the vehicle sent a new letter instructing Daniel to preserve the sedan until the independent investigation was complete. None of the messages mentioned Grant Mercer. They did not need to. For the next 2 weeks, Langford Mobility existed beneath a kind of public silence. Samuel's audit expanded. Federal regulators requested documents. The board announced that Grant had been suspended pending investigation, that no conclusion would be treated as final until outside reviewers completed their work, and that every employee dismissed after questioning the shipping accounts would be contacted. Victoria did not hide behind a prepared statement. She stood before the company's workers in the main assembly hall and admitted that systems carrying her signature had failed because she had trusted authority more than verification. Daniel watched the recording once from the garage office. She did not blame a department. She did not call herself a victim. She said responsibility remained with the person whose name stood above the door. 3 days later, she came to the garage without security. Noah was doing long division behind the glass. Daniel was replacing a wheel bearing on a delivery van when Victoria placed a folder on the workbench and waited until he finished tightening the final bolt. Inside was an offer to purchase the garage for 4 times its appraised value, along with a contract naming Daniel Director of Automotive Systems Security. The salary was more money than he had earned in the previous 3 years combined. "You would have a laboratory, a staff, and complete technical authority," she said. Daniel read every page. Then he closed the folder. No, Victoria did not appear offended. "Which part?" "The purchase." He looked around the narrow shop, at the scratched tool cabinets, Noah's backpack beneath the office chair, and the height marks penciled on the doorframe from the years his son had grown there. "This place is not a problem I am trying to escape." She studied him for a moment. "And the position?" Daniel returned the folder. "I can advise. 2 days each week. No meetings after 3:30. No travel without notice. My garage stays mine." Victoria glanced through the office glass at Noah. "School pickup. Every weekday." She accepted the terms without negotiation. Langford Mobility reimbursed the business losses caused by the pressure campaign, created an independent employee reporting office, and placed Samuel in charge of permanent compliance review. The dismissed finance directors were offered reinstatement. Daniel asked that none of those changes carry his name. A week later, the investigation released the sedan back to Victoria. She did not send a driver to collect it. She arrived herself, placed the keys on Daniel's counter, and remained standing there. The car still had the original electrical fault beneath everything that had been hidden inside it. This time, she did not assume the answer would follow her out the door.